If you want to watch a horror movie, no point in messing around, might as well start with the scariest one of all. Isn't that subjective? Not anymore, thanks to the Science of Scare project, which measures heart rate and heart rate variance while screening horror movies to determine the quantifiably scariest of all. So what ranks at number 1? 2012's Sinister. So that's what we're talking about today. Actually, days aren't scary. Let me try that again. That's what we're talking about tonight. Sinister is a supernatural horror about Super 8 snuff films that are more than they seem. It was written by C. Robert Cargill, inspired by a nightmare he had after watching The Ring. It was actually the first movie he ever wrote after years of working as a movie reviewer. It was directed and co-written by Scott Derrickson, who has since directed Doctor Strange, The Black Phone, and more. The movie begins with an unusual scene. An entire family getting hanged from a tree. It's a great way to set the stage. If you saw a guy getting hanged, that'd be one thing. If you've watched a decent number of movies, it's not something you haven't seen before. But an entire family, including children, that's unsettling. And somehow more so considering it's on Super 8 film. It gives the impression of a home movie. So you can imagine someone setting up the camera, watching this happen, and saving it for posterity. It raises some questions. Who is filming this? Why? Those are questions that'll keep you watching and dreading, because we're about to meet a family, and then you have to wonder, does a similar fate await them? Let's meet that family in the process of moving in to the very house where that first family died. Crazy, right? Who would move into a murder house? Meet Ellison Oswalt, played by Ethan Hawke. He's a true crime author with his best days in the rear view. 10 years ago, he wrote Kentucky Blood. Not only was it a hit, but he helped crack a case the police couldn't. His last 2 books are another story. Both were flops, and one got things so wrong, it helped the killer go free. Now he's desperate for another hit. That's why he's here, living in this murder house. The police have not been able to solve the strange crime. 4 of the Stevenson family dead by hanging, but the 5th, their young daughter, is missing. What happened to her? Is she still alive? If Ellison could answer those questions, well, it'd be a big help to the community. He might even save a little girl if she happens to still be alive. Yeah, that would be nice. It'd also make for a great book. Ellison's motivations are muddy, and it leads to some gray, sometimes outright dark decisions, and that's part of what makes the movie compelling. It's a role that requires a strong performance, and Hawke delivers. He was an interesting choice for the movie because he hadn't really done horror before. Personally, I knew him more for movies like Before Sunrise. I would have thought he's the kind of actor who saw horror as beneath him, so it was great to see him get down in the mud with us. Aside from Ellison's questionable motivations for taking on the case, his other moral transgression is that his wife Tracy and 2 children, Trevor and Ashley, are not privy to where they're living. His wife even asks for reassurance. Ellison, we didn't move in a few houses down from a crime scene again, did we? And he says we didn't. Technically, not a lie. They didn't move in a few houses down from a crime scene. They moved into a crime scene. As they move things into the house, Ellison finds something strange in the attic. A scorpion. But stranger than that, a box filled with Super 8 film reels, with labels like Family Hanging Out 2011 or Barbecue 1979, names that'll be a lot less cute once you see what's on those reels. By the way, that box was not there when the police inspected the house after the murder. Someone or something put it there after they left. Their first night in the house, Ellison does not go to bed with his wife. He'll be up for another hour or 2. She's less worried about how late he'll be up than how long they'll be here, desperately chasing after his dream. She wonders if maybe Kentucky Blood was his 15 minutes of fame, his only hit. Personally, I can't relate to that. It's not like I came out with a Spider-Man recap 4 years ago that went viral, and I've been recapping franchises ever since in hopes of recapturing even a small taste of that success. But you know who can relate? Derrickson and Cargill, who both talk on the commentary track about relating to Ellison's anxieties over status and legacy. In some ways, he represents what they fear becoming, someone who takes that anxiety too far at the cost of family. The characters in the movie feel genuine, so it made sense listening to the writer and director talk about how much of this movie is inspired by themselves, their own feelings and experiences. His wife's concern also creates personal and grounded stakes. The movie will spiral into something else, but even before the introduction of supernatural horror, there's already a personal cost to Ellison's investigation. He's so desperate for a hit that he's chasing it at the cost of time with his wife and children. He's uprooted their lives. This isn't the first time he's done it either, and she's starting to reach the end of her patience. All of this helps paint the picture of full-fledged characters, so the horror ultimately lands with more impact, and it sets up the core theme of the movie. Now let's see what's on those reels. The first one he picks up is Family Hanging Out 2011, the one filmed at this very house. It starts like any other home movie. A family plays in a yard. Cut to that same family with bags over their heads and ropes around their necks, all except the little girl, Stephanie. A branch falls, pulling the rope and lifting them off the ground. Next up, Barbecue at 1979. It starts with a family fishing and cuts to them tied up in a car. Again, it's the whole family except one of their children. This particular snuff film ends with someone torching the car, burning that family alive. In the same way I find it creepy to imagine someone holding the camera and watching this, I also find it creepy how they went through the effort of editing. These aren't just home movies. Someone put thought into them. They decided where to make cuts and even chose creepy music for each film. And of course, they chose clever little titles. After watching two families die, Ellison decides to do the right thing. He calls the police to tell them about the box of home movies he found, until he looks at the stack of copies of Kentucky Blood on his shelf. He could report the tapes, or he could use them to investigate the case himself. Maybe write another hit book? He hangs up the call. In terms of moral gray areas, this is one place where Ellison clearly steps over the line. He now has evidence that could help not only with the hanging case, but other cases too. Cases nobody would have ever suspected were connected. The moment is especially effective because it's communicated silently. Ellison doesn't have someone to talk to about this, where he can say, yeah, we could turn in the evidence, or we could solve the case ourselves. Instead, his internal thoughts are communicated through action alone. He just needs to look at a pile of Kentucky Blood copies, and we get it. As the night goes on, Ellison hears movement. At the end of the hall, a box opens itself, and a child flops out of it, screaming at the top of his lungs. It's his son, Trevor, having another night terror. This is another example where the director pulls from his own life. Derrickson's son had night terrors, where he would scream bloody murder in the middle of the night. And just like Ellison does in the movie, Derrickson would calm him down by taking him outside and telling him to look at the stars. There's also a moment here where Tracy joins him outside, and Ellison says, I want to tell you something, and then after hesitation, says he's just really sorry. He was probably thinking about confessing about the tapes he found, or telling her they're living in a murder house. That'd make it the second time that night he thought about doing the right thing, being honest with the cops, being honest with his wife. Both create tension because you see the character driving past these off-ramps where maybe he could escape the horror you know is coming. It creates the false hope which prevents horror from devolving into snuff films where you're just there to watch people suffer and die. If they have a fighting chance, or at least you believe they do, they have those off-ramps, there might be an actual story. This scene is also important because it shows more of the toll on his family. Trevor's night terrors are being triggered, perhaps in part due to the supernatural horror present, but also because he's been uprooted again, thanks to Ellison's dreams of fame and fortune. And you see how a person can lie to themselves. Ellison, like Walter White, is doing it for his family. And anyway, Trevor's night terrors aren't his fault. They've happened before. They're just happening again. You see how someone talks themselves into following Bad Choice Road. If you know me, I can't pass up a Better Call Saul or Breaking Bad reference. I'm sorry. The next morning, after the wife and kids leave, Ellison is back to the reels. Next up, Pool Party 66. It starts as it sounds, before suddenly every member of the family except one child finds themselves restrained to lounge chairs. The chairs are pulled into the water one by one, and they all drown. In the corner of the pool, something strange. A figure with a sharp white face and large black eyes, watching the family die before it turns his head as though to look at Ellison himself on the other side of the screen. One thing this movie does well is pacing. It has a few jump scares, but doesn't rely on that entirely. It also has an increasing sense of dread, thanks to the escalation of scares. The snuff films themselves are already unsettling, but now we've introduced a new element that takes it from a human-based horror to something supernatural. The mysterious figure looks strange enough, and the fact that it's submerged underwater without an apparent need to breathe gives it an otherworldly feel. Then, of course, it looks at the camera, which means not only is it looking at Ellison, but it's looking at you. This is also the first time you can spot the glowing green liquid. You see it in the family's cups, and later we'll learn that it's poison used to subdue the families that star in these films. Ellison is interrupted from his snuff film marathon when his wife and son return home in the middle of an argument. Trevor got in trouble at school for drawing a picture of a family hanging off a tree on the whiteboard. She did not want the kids finding out what their dad is writing about, but Trevor heard the story and clearly it left an impression. I love how genuine the interactions feel within the family. You hear the argument in the background before Ellison walks in on it. The way the camera follows him walking from the office all the way to the front door, and the confusion of listening in on a fight partway through, it all adds up to something that feels real. And it emphasizes how much this movie plants us in Ellison's point of view. We leave it occasionally, but for the most part, we're only with him, experiencing the story as he does. Their interactions also feel genuine in what they don't show, like that night when Tracy tells Ellison she's putting the kids to bed, and he hardly acknowledges her. Those are the sort of interactions that communicate the chilled mood between them. That night, it's back to the reels. Tonight's is Sleepy Time 98. This one starts in the kitchen with more glasses of poison. In this film, the family is already restrained. One by one, whoever is wielding the camera cuts their throats. Another great example of Ellison's point of view. Much of this reel we watch in the reflection of his glasses. It's not only an interesting choice, but also an economical one. It allows us to watch the footage and his reactions simultaneously. When it's the child's turn to die, Ellison turns away from the screen. He isn't looking, so neither are we. It goes blurry. Not only is it a tasteful choice, but it further emphasizes POV. Also, a reminder of how much this movie leaves to the imagination. It's easy to walk away thinking it was a violent and gory movie, but a lot of the violence is brief, off-screen, or obscured. In Barbecue 79, for example, a family burns, but all we see is the car burning. There's no charred flesh or anything like that. In fact, they originally thought the movie might go for a PG-13. Reviewing the footage again, Ellison spots a strange demonic symbol painted on the wall. He adds it to his evidence board. He also spots evidence the reel was filmed in St. Louis. Going online reveals a murder case from '98, which follows the same pattern as the one Ellison is investigating in his home. A family was murdered, except one of their children, who has been missing ever since. It's weird. So is the creaking sound in the attic. And so is the dark when the power suddenly goes out. Ellison wanders the dark house. More sound, this time a bang and some footsteps. In the attic, he finds a snake and some drawings, depicting the various murders from those tapes, complete with labels: Mom, Dad, Brother, Sister, and Mr. Boogie. Now that strange figure from the pool has a name. Ellison's creeping in the attic ends when he falls through the floor. An EMT treats his leg, and Ellison meets Deputy So-and-so. The character never gets a name, but he introduces himself as a fan, with hopes to end up in Ellison's book. He mentions how the books always end with thank yous to people from the force who helped out. Things like, "I couldn't have done this without the tireless efforts of Deputy So-and-so from the local police department." He would love to be Ellison's Deputy So-and-so on this case. and that's how he gets the nickname. Ellison is happy to take the help. Without telling the deputy why or how he knows about them, Ellison asks for street addresses on the previous murders from the reels. The next day, Ellison is back to his research. By now, he's digitized all the reels, so he can do it all from his laptop. And something weird. In the film of the family hanging, he spots him in the background, Mr. Boogie. He's in the burning family video too. Was he there before too? If you rewind earlier in the movie, when Ellison first watches those reels, can you spot him? No, but I love how on first viewing you aren't sure. It's like the movie is gaslighting you and you have to wonder, how did you miss that? It's more of the movie putting you in Ellison's point of view, making you feel as off-kilter as him. We'll later learn more about this mysterious figure and find out that images or footage are like gateways he can move in and out of. That's how he can be there in one scene but not the other. Later that morning, Ashley learns to make coffee the way her dad likes it, and she delivers it to him. He gets a call from Deputy So-and-so with the addresses he asked for. That's how Ellison starts to discover the pattern. I'm not sure why exactly, but I find the pattern somehow unintuitive. It's pretty straightforward, but I guess it's unusual and therefore confusing. The filmmakers knew it too, because they were afraid viewers wouldn't see what Ellison sees, so they ad-libbed a line here that wasn't in the script.
Before the Stevensons moved here, they lived where the Miller family murders happened.
The part that makes it unusual is that in a traditional horror movie, you expect that a family would move into a place where something horrible happened, and then horrible things happen to them. Instead, Sinister adds an extra step. The Miller family was killed. Then the Stevensons moved into their house. Later, the Stevensons moved again before they were murdered in their new house, the house which Ellison has just moved into. So you move into a murder house, House A, then you move again to House B, get murdered, thus turning House B into a murder house. I know it's simple, but no matter how many times I say it, it feels confusing. Worth mentioning that while Ellison has this realization, the image of Mr. Boogie on his laptop turns to look at him before returning to his original position. Also worth mentioning that Ellison was filming himself looking at the drawings of Mr. Boogie in the attic before he crashed through the floor. Reviewing that footage now shows a bunch of ghostly children's hands pulling him through the floor. It's around here we get the idea the footage itself is dangerous. Mr. Boogie isn't just captured on film, he's living in it, or something. And because that footage shows families dying, we know Ellison isn't just putting himself at risk, but his wife and kids too. And as I think about why this movie scored so high in the Science of Scare Project, I think part of it is that it's about movies. Think of it this way. If you watch The Conjuring, for example, you'll see a family haunted because they moved into a house that used to belong to a witch. There's some distance there for the viewer. You're safe because you haven't moved into a witch's house. But in Sinister, maybe it's a little easier to relate to Ellison. He's in danger partly because he watched those snuff films. Well, you watched them too. Mr. Boogie is watching him from the other side of the screen. Well, when the figure looks at the camera, he's looking at you too. That night, Ellison wakes up to the sounds of a film reel. He finds it playing itself, the family hanging video. While he's up anyway, Ellison looks at a printout from that reel, where Mr. Boogie is visible in the bushes. Ellison holds the photo up in front of the window, matching the bushes in that picture to the ones outside. When he moves the photo away, Mr. Boogie is still there, not in a photo, but in reality, in the bushes outside his window. Ellison heads outside to investigate, but doesn't find anyone, other than Trevor having another night terror. To me, that's one of the most effective scares in the movie. When Ellison holds up the photo, it focuses your eye on that spot. Just like him, you're looking to see how the picture lines up with reality. And then once the movie has your focus, it does something that violates everything that came before. Up until now, Mr. Boogie is an entity that was confined to the photos and reels. Suddenly, he's there in real life. It also feeds on a fear we all know. When you look out the window at night, in the darkness, your mind fills in all sorts of blanks. It's so easy to see things or think you see things. Ellison brings his son inside, then returns outside to get his bat. and spots a big growling dog. He doesn't know it, but the dog isn't growling at him. It's growling at the 5 children, the ghosts standing behind Ellison. Not sure if this was intentional, but there's a moment here that feels like a Shining reference. Ellison is talking to the dog while he grabs his bat and says,
I don't want to hurt you. I just want to get my bat. So if you come at me, I can bash your head in, okay?
Kind of like in The Shining, where Jack is asking for the bat and in a similarly odd tone reassures his wife,
I said, I'm not gonna hurt you. I'm just gonna bash your brains.
Back inside, Ellison gets another chance to do the right thing. Tracy tells him the obvious truth. He should drop the book and they should leave town. It's been less than a week and Ellison is already a mess, not to mention the return of Trevor's night terrors. But Ellison cannot do that. He's so close. Fame, fortune, legacy, it could all be his. I've already commented a couple of times on how genuine the family arguments feel in this movie, and I'll do it one more time, just to point out the roller coaster way they go. They aren't non-stop yelling, but instead they'll go from calm to suddenly losing control and then calm again. It reminds me of something I heard about acting drunk in a movie. It often comes across as insincere if you try to act drunk. Instead, you have to act like someone who is drunk but is trying to act sober, because that's what it is in real life. Drunkenness in some ways becomes a haze between internal intent and what ultimately comes out the other side. I think anger is similar, especially when speaking to a loved one. If we're angry, we try to keep it under control until frustration grows so much it inevitably slips out. That's exactly how Hawk plays it, and that's why it's such a roller coaster, swinging wildly from quiet seething to outward frustration. The sun comes up and it's another day. Deputy so-and-so drops by and Ellison finally brings him into the loop. He tells him about the murder cases, all connected by the same ritual, filmed family murders. Or how about filmed family fatalities? Maybe that's disrespectful. Every case ends with one child missing, presumably taken by the killer, and in some cases, that demonic symbol is found at the crime scene. What is that symbol? The deputy has an idea who could answer that question. Professor Jonas, an expert on the occult. Before speaking with that professor, it's time for Ellison's nightly viewing. Tonight's screening, Lawn Work 86. The one where Ellison finds out what a lawnmower does to a person's face. Though actually, we don't see that, and neither does Ellison, because he looks away. It's almost the opposite of a jump scare, because the footage telegraphs what's going to happen. You see the lawnmower, and you know it's going to become a tool of death. Once it starts moving, there's tension waiting for the gore, but it's ultimately left up to the imagination. To be fair, the movie's score screeches at that moment, which does make you jump, but it only enhances what's already there. In horror movie analysis, you often hear how it can be good to leave things to the imagination, the power of suggestion. I won't say that's always the better choice, because I've seen plenty of effective horror where none of the violence is left to the imagination, but this is a great example where the former works. You don't need to see the violence for the climax of that tension. You just need the release of that tension, which comes from the knowledge that what you feared has, in fact, occurred. A person's face got ripped to shreds by a lawnmower. Confining it to your imagination also allows it to linger. If you actually see the gore, that means it ends when the scene ends. But if you don't see it, the image and the awful idea is allowed to fester. Sometimes that can be more unsettling, and it's one of the reasons some may walk away remembering a much gorier movie than they actually saw. Time for a call with Professor Jonas. Why does he look so familiar? It's Kingpin, Vincent D'Onofrio, in an uncredited role. He tells Ellison all about that symbol. It's associated with the worship of a pagan deity dating back to Babylonian times. Bagul, the eater of children. He needs the souls of human children to survive, so he lures them away from the physical world into his own netherworld, where he consumes their souls over time. More on that later. For now, time for another episode of Ellison waking up in the middle of the night to Super 8 films playing of their own accord. Ellison wanders the house with a bat, while ghost children, trapped in Bagul's netherworld, play a game of hide and seek. Ellison never sees any of them, but boy do we. One of those children is in Ashley's room now, standing next to a drawing of the hanged family, watched over by Mr. Boogie, who we now know is Bagul. The paranoid Ellison sits on the couch with his bat until the sun comes up. That's a practical effect, by the way. There's no dissolve or fade, just someone outside physically moving a light to mimic the sun coming up. Just a small example of the passion and creativity that clearly went into this movie behind the scenes. This is also an important sequence. It's where we learn what's really going on. That's always risky because horror tends to become less horrifying the more we explain it. And I bet that's why Derrickson and Cargill felt it important to ramp things up here. Now we've moved from weird stuff in film reels to ghosts outright running around the house and creeping around Ellison. And for me, it gets mixed results. The first jump scare of the girl getting way too close to Ellison, and you see her messed up face, that startled me. Partly due to the proximity, it feels like a violation for a ghost to get that close. But after that, the ghost kids feel cheesy, mainly because they're prancing around the house, hiding when Ellison turns around. You can almost hear them in your mind shouting, "Boo!" It feels less creepy ghost kids and more like annoying real-life kids. But the way the sequence wraps up, where you see Ashley awake in bed just staring at the ghost girl, shushing her, next to that drawing of the family in Bagul, that worked better for me. Goes back to what I said earlier about not acting drunk. Here, peekaboo kids are trying to act scary versus the girl who is just sharing her art. And she's telling Ashley to keep quiet. The matter-of-fact attitude around something so strange and awful, I find more unsettling than a bunch of kids prancing around the house. Go figure. The next day, Ellison asks Officer So-and-so to stop by. He asks if the Stevensons reported experiencing anything weird before their hanging, but So-and-so has nothing to offer. After the deputy leaves, more of that strangeness. Apparently their daughter has an imaginary friend, Stephanie, who told her to draw on the walls outside her bedroom. She isn't supposed to do that. Though Ellison is less upset about the wall and more unnerved because he's pretty sure Stephanie is no imaginary friend. She's the Stevensons' missing child, communicating from Bagul's netherworld. Oh, and when Ashley mentions Stephanie used to live here, that's the tip-off to Tracy that her husband moved them into a murder house. Which leads to my favorite exchange in the movie, Ellison's feeble denial. No one was murdered in the house. It happened in the backyard. They get into a fight and some important truths are laid bare. He's writing this book for himself because yes, the family may not be as comfortable financially as they once were, but he could make money another way. He could write textbooks, but that's not what he wants to do. He wants to make money this way. He's doing it for legacy and to give his life meaning. To be fair, that's not a bad thing, and these choices do not have to be mutually exclusive. People should feel fulfilled in life, and families should be supportive. The problem is that Ellison's desperation for meaning and status led to him lying to his family, keeping things from the police, and putting them all in danger. It's not a cautionary tale against the pursuit of fulfillment. It's a cautionary tale against going too far. One more night of horrors. That's what it takes to convince Ellison. He's woken up by a light in his face. The sound of Super 8 reels, not in his office, but in the attic. With an audience of children, or at least their souls. On the screen, Bagul. Ellison is transfixed until the pagan deity breaches the barrier between screen and reality. Ellison falls down the attic ladder, and the box of reels follow him down. After that, he burns the reels and projector. Time to go. He rushes his family out of the house, back to their old home. No more murder house, no more snuff films, no more book. I mentioned earlier how it's important to see the off-ramps in horror because it makes a difference between a snuff film and a horror film. The off-ramp builds hope, which builds tension. This scene is the perfect example because finally, Ellison is taking the off-ramp, and it's a roller coaster. He even gets stopped by the sheriff. Oh no, will they not make it out of town? Then The sheriff lets them go, which provides a release of tension and more hope, which only makes it hit harder when we find out Ellison has only put them in even more danger. Their first night back in the old house. Wow, look at that house! What does he need another hit for? They're clearly fine. Ellison finds an email from Professor Jonas with scans about Boogie, including images of a scorpion and snake. Sound familiar? Both creatures Ellison has encountered before, clearly signs of Boogie's coming. Ellison speaks with the professor again and learns more about Boogie. He is said to live in images. In the ancient past, that meant paintings and sketches. Those images become gateways into his realm. Simply viewing them makes you vulnerable to possession. Boogie can make you do terrible things. In some cases, he would even abduct the viewer into the images themselves. Children especially are vulnerable. Of course, the professor does not believe any of this. Ellison is another story. It's hard not to believe now, and even harder after he finds another box of reels in his house. They're the same recordings from before, only they contain extended cut endings, which reveal who is behind each murder. The missing children. Boogie makes them kill their own family before taking their souls to his realm. Deputy so-and-so calls with the bad news. Ellison has played right into the pattern. A family is murdered. Another family moves in. Once they move out, their new home becomes the latest crime scene. This time is no different. Ashley sneaks the green liquid into Ellison's coffee. The coffee her mother taught her to make a few days ago. Ashley subdues her family, hacks them to pieces with an axe, and joins the others in Mr. Boogie's world. It's just like the professor said, the images are a gateway. In the ancient past, that would be paintings or sketches. Now, it's film. Ashley records the murderous night before Boogie carries her into the recording itself. And that is where Sinister ends. Just like with the previous deaths, much of this is left to the imagination. We see plenty of blood on the walls, but we don't see any actual gore. We don't see the family hacked to bits except in her doodle. The right move for a lot of reasons. In part, when you're putting children in danger or making them killers, it can be a cheap way to disturb the audience because children are an obvious no-go zone. So it feels a bit more respectful to avoid cheap horrors by leaving it to the imagination. Admittedly, it also feels a bit silly that a 7-year-old could murder her entire family with an axe, and it might come across that way if actually put to film. So yeah, better as a doodle. In the end, is Sinister really the scariest movie of all time? Yes, scientifically. Have you not been paying attention? The bottom line to me is that Sinister is effective in its pacing, in the way it ramps up tension, and then goes the extra mile with a unique concept, an entity that exists inside images and footage, which unlocks a new level of fear, considering that is exactly the medium through which the story is told. Thematically, I don't think it has a whole lot to say on the topic it's considering, the way a person can throw themselves too far in the pursuit of meaning in their lives, but it does a good job attaching its supernatural horror to that real concept. That desperate search for meaning is a real issue with real consequences, only Sinister exaggerates them with Boogie. In reality, if you spend too much time and energy on work, you could push your family away. In this horror tale, you get them hacked to bits by an axe and one of them trapped in a netherworld. So be careful out there, and if you find a mysterious box of snuff films, don't watch them. Actually, good rule of thumb in general, don't watch snuff films, you weirdos.